There's conversations at dinner tables today that are scaring the hell out of some of these families, where it's always been their tradition that they vote away and believe away and they think away about other people. Those Mexican folks are trying to take our jobs, and those gay people are going straight to hell. I think kids are sitting at these tables and going, yeah, I go to school with a kid that's from Peru, or a kid that's from Colombia, or a student that's trans, and we worked on a project together. I don't think that's true, Grandpa or Mom. Like, I really don't like that you say that because one of my friends is gay.
My name is Mark, and my position as the first non-white principal in my school's history was put in jeopardy after being targeted for being unapologetic in my stance to create a safe, inclusive environment for all people.
So, wow, where do I begin? I love education. I love working with kids, and as I started my career, that's what I thought I was going to do, just teach and coach basketball. And then I finally went into administration. Never thought I would be there, but I absolutely fell in love with the concept of creating an environment for the educators who are there to serve kids. I mean, if you get that right, how much more powerful can that be? I came to Central City School District in the 2018-2019 school year. I'd already been a principal in another district, and after taking a year to work with another organization, I was coming back into public education. And so I took an assistant principal job in CSD at Central City High School. Quickly, in the spring of 2019, I was promoted to principal at Central City Elementary School, which fed into Central City High. Fast forward to March of 2020, my first year there as principal at the elementary, and we, of course, had the pandemic, and it shut everything down. We don't come back until after spring break. Because of the work that the staff did and the results we were getting for our students, I had an opportunity that came to me to be the principal at Central City High School in May of 2020, and only a couple weeks after I was named principal, George Floyd was murdered in the streets of Minneapolis. And so, I watched all around me people kind of rallying around this tragic event, right? Everybody's at home, we've got all this time, we're consuming media, and we're watching this play out. It's got all the big companies coming out, showing their support, saying, hey, what can we do to end systemic racism? What can we do to hold police accountable? In areas around me, you have districts and their leadership teams doing the same thing, who otherwise were largely silent about issues regarding, especially systemic racism and police brutality. And so, I was very encouraged by that. I had people reaching out to me that I hadn't heard from in the past who just wanted to learn more about how they could help and how they could be an ally. I saw people in the streets protesting, and so it was really encouraging. Meanwhile, I've got this position as a high school principal. And one of the things that district leadership told me when I got the role was, I want you to use this opportunity. You've got a larger platform now, and we know who you are. We know you're a champ for the underdogs. We want you to be that person and use your platform. And so, thinking through that lens, I'm like, well, nobody in the district's saying anything about this event, but I know we've got a lot of students and people in our community that are grappling with this. I use that as an opportunity to make a video to send to the community saying, we know this is real. We're fighting this pandemic of systemic racism. How can we come together? We know it's going to be hard. We're going to have tough conversations, but I just want people to know I'm here for you to do this hard work of dismantling these things that are trying to hold us back. At the time when I sent it, nothing but positive feedback. There wasn't a single email or call or anything that came my way that said, hey, what are you doing here? This isn't okay. It was all, thank you for sending this and thank you for speaking up. The demographics of both the elementary and high school I worked at were predominantly white. But at the middle school, you have about a 6% African-American population, another 20% Hispanic, but a mix of people from all over the world. There are really big Middle Eastern and Southeast Asian populations in this area because there's a city close by that's very, very multicultural, bringing in people from all over the world. And then when you transition to high school, it gets a little more diverse when it comes to the African American and Hispanic population. So half of the students at the high school are students of color. The school looked very different than it had a decade ago. So for me to now be in this space, to be the principal of the school, it was very encouraging that, we've got this melting pot now. This school is looking more like what we see across the world. And that's part of what led me to sending the video out, because I knew that we have more people in this community now that needed to hear this message, right?
That was the 2020-2021 school year, my first year as principal. I was the first non-white principal in the school's long history. And there were very contentious school board elections going on in West Censor. Their school board got overrun by far-right extremists.
Over the course of the year, I would have people send me these things from these Facebook echo chambers. They were calling me like a lieutenant of critical race theory. They were saying that I was there to destroy the school district and teaching divisive concepts. They were harping on the fact that my colleagues and I were doing work to disrupt inequities. They had issues with that. But all along, I didn't hear anything from people in the district at the administration level. There was never a concern about that. It was just this group in these echo chambers. I'd have friends of mine that were in the community say, hey, have you seen this? And I just kind of shrugged it off like, that's crazy. Y'all know me. You know what I'm doing. I'm just here to make sure our kids have a great education, make sure teachers have the resources they need. I started hearing murmuring that summer of 2020. That's when it started. When I started hearing things from people in the community. But I didn't get any emails. Like, nobody sent me an email. None of those people were contacting me saying, hey, I got a problem with you. No phone calls, no emails, no request for an appointment, zero. But at the same time, there was an uptick in the PIA, the Public Information Act, FOIA requests. And so you start to see my name, critical race theory, George Floyd. These were the key words, systemic racism. They put West Censor as a key term, Mount Censor School District as a key term, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those were the things that they were trying to pull from my emails, social media accounts, and text messages. They wanted access to all that to highlight this conspiracy that I was bringing critical race theory into the district. But really, they were just against anything celebrating diversity, embracing inclusivity, or trying to provide an equitable education for all kids. That's what they're about, disrupting, sowing chaos and division in the community. You'd have these parents and family members of kids at my school that would go into these echo chambers to defend me and say, hey, look, we know this guy. I don't know what you're talking about, but that's not what he's about. And they would quickly get kicked out of those groups. Throughout this whole time that there were all these concerns from these people, none of them knew me. It's like it sounds hard to believe, but literally zero of them knew me. Zero of them had kids in a school, at the elementary school or the high school, absolutely zero. And I had zero requests from any of these people to actually meet with me with legitimate concerns. Most rational people would think, if you have a concern, go talk to the person, right? But it's what I've said all along. This has never been about a rational concern. It's always been about creating this boogeyman to create division, really sowing chaos in communities, sowing that distrust into public schools so that they can disrupt public education and divert public dollars into private school vouchers. That's what this has been about since Brown versus Board of Education and since 1954. I kind of had that feeling. There was always just that gut feeling throughout the school year that something was going to happen. It was just a matter of when that shoe was going to drop. But I tried to just keep my head down, even though this was happening. It was a difficult year. At the high school level, we have close to 200 teachers and support staff and 3,000 students. Kids going back and forth because they could be remote one day and in person the next. Teachers trying to learn smart boards and new learning management systems. There was so much to do that I didn't have time to be consumed with the other nonsense. I just kind of pushed it to the side and didn't speak out, probably as much as I should have. In my heart of hearts, I feel like I did the right thing, just focusing on the well-being of our staff and students and trying to provide each student, regardless of where they're at, a great education. But they really used our circumstances to their advantage, because while we were focused on the work, they were focused on spewing nonsense and getting people's fears up. During that school year, the superintendent in this district always has one campus representative as part of his district leadership team. They meet once every 2 weeks and they review policy. During this time, he'd talk about what's going on with the new state recommendations for how to address COVID and absences and all these things, right? And so the superintendent always picks one campus representative out of the elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and alternative school. So quite a few people to choose from to be that one campus representative for his district leadership team, his executive cabinet. Well, who did he pick? Interestingly enough, me. So during that year, I was the campus representative that he entrusted to be the voice for the campuses in those meetings. And I have to say this, I was the only person of color in any of those meetings because the district administration wasn't representative of what the district really looked like. I mean, I would tell them in those meetings, there's something coming. And unless we really get clear about who we are and what we're about, they're gonna hijack the message and they're gonna make it about all these other things. But every time I spoke up in those meetings and tried to sound alarms, it was met with crickets. It's as if they knew it was coming, but no one was willing to step up and go, hey, we're gonna fight this. So fast forward to August of 2021, when a disgruntled community member aired grievances about me and everything really hit the fan. At a public meeting, a woman got up and was allowed to rail against me and called for my termination. She aired the grievances that had been kind of in this private echo chamber. He's trying to bring critical race theory. He's trying to destroy our schools. He's social emotional learning, all the buzzwords. She got those in within her allotted time. The day after, I got a call from the executive director of communications apologizing that they allowed that. I got a call from the executive director of human resources apologizing, saying, Mark, that shouldn't have happened. We're so sorry. I got calls, voicemails, text messages from almost all the board members. I heard from them, we got your back. We love you. We love what you're doing at the school. One left me like a 3-minute voicemail espousing his support for me and how much he loved what I was doing at the school. But no one spoke publicly. And so, it came for me to address this. I was like, I'm gonna have to address this in some way. I put my message out there and of course, got a message from a local news station. They were like, man, we gotta get this message out there. At this point, I was like, well, it is what it is. I'm not gonna allow this group of people to talk about me and then sit idly by while my reputation is tarnished. I had to speak out because I knew my life would have been a living hell all of that school year. I don't think I would have made it to Thanksgiving break. That group of people were determined to root me out, and we know what that does for educators. So I was like, I've got to speak up because if I don't, I'm giving you the keys to my career and letting you dictate what happens. So it's time for me to take things into my own hands. Other teachers aren't saying much about their similar experiences, and I understand because as a teacher, I'm sitting there going, well, look, this is the principal who's beloved in this district and was able to rise through the ranks, and this is happening to him. I'm just gonna sit back and keep my mouth shut. But the parents, the families and the students showed up in droves. I didn't have a single student or a single family member or parent that showed up to a board meeting that had anything negative to say about me. They showed up in droves and were supportive. The students, they staged a walkout. There were Republican parents, of course. I mean, I don't just serve Democrat or independent families. All those parents were saying, no, we're okay with you doing this. There were hundreds of students that walked out. I had a group of students that were all taking a full load of AP courses, very high performing students that are trying to get into some of the most prestigious colleges in the country that took it upon themselves and organized that. Even though I'd only been their principal that one year, they were able to see through the nonsense. They were walking out for me, but many of these students were students of color and allies of those students. And they saw what this would mean for them, for other students in marginalized populations. So at the end of October of 21, when I was put on leave, the students were like, hell no. That's our principal, we love him. Like, we want answers. And of course, they didn't have any. So then we go through a whole big back and forth with me in the district because they would say it was one thing and so on. This is one of the reasons I'm glad that I spoke up. And so we came to an agreement in December of that year, like 5 or 6 months after the initial school board meeting and me having to defend myself to non-disparagement and a settlement agreement to where they pay me. I'm still being paid by them until October of this year. It's been a really challenging last year and a half. It's weighed on me like, what do I want to do? Do I want to do this? I keep coming back to, yes, this has been my heart. This has been my passion since I can remember, since I was a high school kid going, hey, I like what my coaches do for me. I had that handful of teachers. I want to be that for the next generation of kids. I want to help in that way. It's interesting. I had lunch with a mentor of mine who was an assistant superintendent here in the area. She's a wonderful lady and a professor close by. She was like, Mark, you know you're not going to be in a public school district around here. Wonderful as you are, nobody's going to hire you in a public school district around here. Have you considered relocation to another state? And I said, yeah, we've thought about that, but our family's here. I've got my 2 older kids here. So it's kind of discouraging to know that there's a position in my home district open right now, but I know I won't even get an opportunity to even walk through the door to get an interview for the job, even though I've got the experience and the credentials, not only in general, but in the district. I know the people, but they're not going to bring me in for an interview. All of these things that have happened, it's created an opportunity to advocate in ways that maybe I should have more strongly in the past and been a support to. I've coached a ton of educators throughout this time just because I have the time to do it. I haven't charged anybody a dime, but I know that there are so many educators that are going through similar experiences. It's become so commonplace. And so I fear that there's so many people that have suffered in silence. And so anytime I get a hit from an educator that's saying, hey, I just needed somebody to talk to see my way through this experience, that kind of charges me up because, it's just the opportunities to support a lot of really good people who are trying to do good things for kids that, unfortunately, are being attacked by people with nefarious political agendas. These people know now that fear has always been a motivator when it comes to turning out a certain part of the electorate. Go back to the Southern strategy. It's like, oh no, we can't say that. You can't say the N-word anymore. Well, we'll just say, or we'll call it, war on crime, or it's like war on drugs, or we'll say, coded language. I think Trump has something to do with it, but if anything, he's kind of given them a sort of permission to speak what they've felt for so long. He's given them an okay to be brazen with this. And in all honesty, I'd rather know exactly who I'm dealing with than having to, glide around. That's what I feel like we've been doing for all this time. I think there's a lot of people who felt this way, and I'd rather know you feel that way because it's easier to deal with you when I know how you really feel about me. So you've had this noise about vouchers for a long time, but largely in the past, it's kind of been pushed off as crazy talk. Like, that'll never happen. But that's what this is. They saw a boogeyman in critical race theory, which is not, we know it's not critical race theory. It's anything that has to do with race, sexism, misogyny. They'll put anything under CRT, and they've said that. Is it Chris Rufo that said specifically, we're just going to hijack that term and put anything that we want to attack underneath the guise of critical race theory? And so they know they've got this fear, this great boogeyman here to scare people with. And if you're going to make people scared, what better way than to tell them somebody's doing something to their kids? And Black Lives Matter and the protests around George Floyd, I think that has something to do with it. I also think, us being in a position to be online. And so you've got parents who are schooled in a certain way, and they're logging in and they're able to see what's happening in the classroom. And so today's classroom is more geared towards, hey, let's do some team building. Let's share with each other. It's like, we know that's how you build a sense of belonging. And when you build that sense of belonging, along with a great nurturing space, we know what that can do for student outcomes. I think the biggest thing for me is the change in kids today. These far-right extreme folks are blaming it on schools alone. But kids today, they have access to so much knowledge. They aren't just going to believe stuff just because you tell them. If they think a teacher can talk a kid into just doing something when we have a hard time getting them to follow their syllabus, much less trying to teach critical race theory, go ahead and try. But I think that's what scares them. There's conversations at dinner tables today that are scaring the hell out of some of these families, where it's always been their tradition that they vote away and believe away and they think away about other people. Those Mexican folks are trying to take our jobs, and those gay people are going straight to hell. And they're this, and they're that, and they're others, right? I think kids are sitting at these tables and going, yeah, I go to school with a kid that's from Peru, or a kid that's from Colombia, or, a student that's trans, and we worked on a project together. I don't think that's true, Grandpa or Mom. I really don't like that you say that because one of my friends is gay. They know that the kids are going to shift. And so, especially here in this county, even though it's a hotbed for this nonsense, you've seen a shift in the voting patterns. And so they see that, and they're afraid. Anytime throughout our history, when you've had moments of progress, this is just par for the course. That's what I've tried to tell people. Anytime I have an opportunity to speak, it's like, we should be ready for this because this has happened before, and it's going to happen again. We've got a playbook just like they do. We just have to not act surprised that people are lashing out in fear. This is just what happens anytime we're on the precipice of progress. What's really interesting is I don't talk to a lot of teachers from around here. They aren't the ones that are reaching out. It's other places, because I feel like so many teachers here think they can't win the battle. And I can definitely understand why they would think that. But what I will say is that there's been certain districts in this area, and Censorville Valley School District being one of them, that has done a wonderful job of coming back and combating this nonsense. I think it rests with district leadership. If you've got a strong leader that's got a stomach for just standing in there and supporting their people, that's where I've seen this kind of success in combating this far-right extremism. My experience speaks to a larger issue that happens in a lot of school districts. While it wasn't always surrounding these issues, I saw it over the course of my time in various districts. If they would just talk to their teachers, they would be better able to resolve things. But far too often, people will have direct lines to board members and superintendents, and districts make decisions based on that, and they don't have to go through a process. I mean, I've seen it as a principal where a teacher gave a student a consequence in class, and the complaint made it all the way to the highest levels of administration. That complaint came in and went straight up the chain, and they made the teacher change it. When you do that, the distrust amongst the staff increases, and that happens a lot. It's just like, what am I to do when certain people have a direct line to the decision makers in the district?